So this is the third and last video related to Chapter 3 of our open text and dealing with consequential ethics. So in the previous videos, we've looked at the concepts of utilitarianism, we looked at the concept of altruism, and we've also looked at some of the limitations of the consequential ethic, especially with regards to utilitarianism, that we saw that it doesn't really account for personal justice, it doesn't really account for personal rights, and it also doesn't acknowledge the fact that there are just some things in life that are valuable in and of themselves, regardless of the amount of happiness or unhappiness that they bring. And in this video, I want to talk about another consequential ethic known as egoism or ethical egoism. And so we'll introduce that. So this lecture looks at this ethical egoism, and we'll first define what ethical egoism is. We'll understand what egoism does not believe, and then we will look at what they do believe, and then we'll consider some problems with the ethical egoist argument. And again, this material is based on the book by James Rachel's The Elements of Moral Philosophy. So imagine this. Not imagine this. Consider this. Consider this. So each year, millions of children die of malnutrition. And according to UNICEF, about 15,000 children die this way every day. That comes to about 5,475,000 children dying of malnutrition annually. At the same time, Americans spend billions of dollars, almost $10 billion a year, on movie tickets. So this may present a moral problem for some, and you might say, well, we should forego spending money on movies in order to try and give it to help the hunger across the world. So we can feed the children more if we stop going to so many movies. However, an ethical egoist would say, no, we don't have to worry about that. In fact, we can actually regard our entertainment as more important than feeding the hungry. And if we were to feed the hungry, they'd further go on and say, it may actually be morally wrong for us to do so. So they might say our entertainment is actually more important than feeding the hungry. Now, the question is how in the world can anyone think this way? Well, before we get there, let's first talk about what ethical egoists don't say. So, an egoist do not say that we should promote one's own interests as well as others. So, in other words, what they're saying is, you know what? If I'm an egoist, I'm obviously going to be worried about myself, right? You see the word ego there, which is kind of dealing with yourself, right? Well, one thing they do not say is that we can promote our interests as well as others. They really are only worried about your own interest. Now, they also don't say, well, don't avoid helping others. If in kind of looking out for your own interests, you somehow benefit others, that's fine. We can do that, but we don't do it because we help others. We simply do it because it's in our own best interest. And then what they also do not say is that they do not say that we should always do what pleases ourselves, because there are some things that we might find pleasure in that just simply aren't good for us. I find pleasure in a lot of donuts, but it would not be good for me to eat as many donuts as I would like to eat, right? And so if I'm an egoist, I would say, right, yeah, I like donuts, and I think I find a lot of pleasure from it, but it obviously wouldn't benefit me, so therefore I probably shouldn't do that, right? So the egoist would say it would be morally wrong to help the children by us not going to the movies and instead giving money to feed the children. Well, what could possibly be wrong with helping others, right? I mean, if we think about it, it'd be hard to come up with an argument that says, no, you shouldn't go help others. You shouldn't help someone out on the street or go visit someone while they're in the hospital or something like that, right? Well, to answer that question, let's look at some of the basic arguments of egoism. So egoism would say this. If you kind of consider this, so if you think about a time when you might have set some friends up and you think, oh, so-and-so would make a great couple or whatever, and so you try and set those two people up, you set them up on a blind date or whatever. It might go well at first, but maybe at the end those people are just hating each other. And it's like, oh, I can't believe you introduced me to her, or I can't believe you introduced me to him. I thought he was great, but then he did this and that, and I wish you'd never even introduced us, right? And so sometimes in our effort to try and help others, we actually cause more harm than good. Economists have seen this. In fact, there's a book about helping developing countries or lesser developed countries. It's called When Helping Hurts. When we provide a lot of aid into one country, like for example, let's just say that we send a lot of donated clothing to a certain country, and we're thinking, oh, look at us, we're helping to clothe those who don't have clothing. Well, at the same time, what we're doing is we're basically guaranteeing that that country will not have its own textile industry, therefore putting a lot of people potentially out of work. Or if we buy one pair of shoes in order to give another pair of shoes out to poor people in Argentina, then you're pretty much guaranteed that Argentina won't have a shoe industry, because it's pretty hard to compete against free. And so therefore, in your effort to try and help others, you may actually be doing no good. Or consider this. Think about it when you need some money, right? How hard is it for you to ask someone to give you some money or to lend some money? Or if you need a ride somewhere, let's say your car's broke down, how easy is it for you to bum a ride off of someone? For most people, it's pretty hard to do. Okay? So why is that, right? Why is it that it's hard for us to ask people to give us a hand, right? Well, that's because sometimes we think, well, we view ourselves as someone who would be really in a dependent state, and we don't like to depend on others, right? And so when we don't like to depend on others, partly because we think, well, when we receive that benefit, somehow we are lesser people. And so we really have this hidden belief that altruism robs people of their value. In other words, it's saying like, well, I don't like asking for help because it makes it seem like I can't do it on my own. And I want to be able to do things on my own. I want to be able to pull myself up by my own bootstraps or whatever. And so in essence, what we're doing is we're saying, when you help people, you're basically saying that they are lesser people than you, because they can't seem to do it on their own, and they need you to help them out, right? And so that's a problem according to egoism. And then finally they would say this, you know what, if you think about it, there's a hidden utility in all of our rules of life, right? If we say don't harm others, or don't lie, or you need to keep your promises, ultimately what we're saying is that what we're doing is we don't harm others because we don't want them to harm us in return. Or we don't want to lie because we wouldn't want to be lied to ourselves, right? And we say people should keep their promises because we want people to keep their promises to us. The hidden utility in all of this, the hidden unity in all of this is that we do all these things in order to benefit ourselves. And so therefore, egoists would say each person ought to pursue his or her own self-interests exclusively. We have no duty except to do what is best for ourselves. In other words, one should do that which is in one's own self-interest. And this is similar to some beliefs of Adam Smith. I mean, the person in business, according to Adam Smith, intends only his own gain, but is led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of the original intention. By pursuing his own interests, he frequently promotes that of society, and does so more effectively than when he directly intends to promote it. By that he means, if we try and do what we think is in our own interests, well, in doing that, we will actually look out for other people's interests. For example, you wanted to be successful in business. How do you be successful in business? You please the customer. You serve the customer. You provide the customer with what they want. So an egoist would say, okay, that's perfectly fine. But what you're really doing is you're really trying to make more money by pleasing other people. It's not about pleasing other people. It's about making your own money. And Smith kind of said that with the invisible hand, right? That we need to intend to our own gain, right? And in doing that, we will look out for others' interests, right? So here's some problems with the egoist logic. Okay, so here's the three different basic views and beliefs of egoism, right? Helping others does no good, altruism robs people of their value, and there's hidden unity among the rules. Well, let's take the first one. Helping others does them no good. Well, that whole concept is basically counter to the basic egoist argument. If the egoist argument is we need to look out for our own self-interests, period, why in the world would we consider whether helping others does any good or not? We shouldn't care one way or the other. And so therefore, this is kind of self-defeating and counter to its own argument. So it doesn't make logical sense, right? There's a logical fallacy there. The fact that altruism supposedly robs people of their value, well, that assumes a false dichotomy. You can help someone else and still value them. I mean, think about the times when you've received help from somebody else. In fact, the times that I've been helped out personally, it's actually made me feel better about myself because I realize that people care about me, right? So it's not a zero-sum game. When one person helps someone, then that other person has to somehow be degraded. No, I think both people can benefit, right? And the concept that there's hidden unity among the rules, well, one's own interest may benefit, but that may not be the only reason. In other words, I may go about my business trying to please my customer, yes, so that my business could be more successful, but I may truly want to help others out by providing them with goods and services to help them and the community to flourish. That is consistent with God's mandates, something that we'll talk about more later on in this class. And there's one other problem with the egoist argument. It assumes that one group should be valued more than another without any rational basis for such a conclusion. I mean, think about this. You have ISIS, for example, who believes that their ISIS views are more important than anyone else's views. And so therefore, infidels need to die if they don't have the same views as ISIS, right? In our own country, we thought that perhaps white views were somehow more important than those of people of color, right? Or even in Nazi Germany, they felt that the Aryan race's views were more important than the Jewish interests. And so egoism, when you try and say that one group, in an egoism, the group would be me versus others, my interests are more important than others' people's interests, that leads to a significant problem, right? We should care for others because their interests are comparable to our own. My interests are not any more or less important than others. So there are some problems with ethical egoism. In fact, there's more than meets the eye with ethical egoism, right? And so therefore, this concludes our look at chapter 3 of our open text that deals with consequential ethics.